Police officers generally are accustomed to trusting the orders and the directives that come down from above. And I guess when you suddenly have the government and you have medical officers and you have the department all encouraging you to uptake a vaccine, with everything else going on, all the other distractions we have, for many people, they didn't really acquire informed consent, and they didn't look into it, and they've just gone down that path. I think a large number, however, felt absolute coercion.
So I'm really excited to be speaking to Roland Crystal, who recently quit the New South Wales Police Force, specifically so he could speak out, and we need more of you. Thanks for coming. How long ago did you quit, and what has it been like since that happened?
Well, look, thanks first up for having me, Monica. It's great to have a chat with you. I walked out in the latter part of July of this year. I was on duty in the highway patrol, and I just hit a brick wall. I realised that there was not going to be an opportunity to be the police officer that I'd been for the previous 30-odd years. I walked out and initially on stress leave, and then I, after making some inquiries, I put in my resignation, sent an email to the Commissioner indicating that I believed his mandate was unlawful and immoral, and I wanted to resign effective immediately. My resignation came through in the early part of October.
And so what was the line for you? Was the line mandating a medical procedure? Was that like the line in the sand for you?
There were various lines. For me, as a police officer, I could see the walls were closing in. I had a valid mask exemption, which most officers would be wearing a mask, and then that would have me singled out in the community, which is problematic for the police to have to continuously explain why I wasn't wearing a mask. Not too long after that, it became apparent that even though I worked all over the state, in the section that I was in, which was the Raptor squad from headquarters, I was told that without having accepted the offer of the vaccine, that I'd be restricted to the Sydney metro area. Now, that was all officers through State Crime Command. So even your homicide squad, whatever, investigators who need to travel were suddenly told that they wouldn't be leaving the Sydney metro area unless they accepted the vaccine. So I could see that the opportunity to be an effective police officer in the manner in which I wanted to police was quickly coming to an end.
And how do you think your colleagues are feeling about all of this? Like, do they share your sentiments, or what do you think about that?
Look, some do. Police officers generally are accustomed to trusting the orders and the directives that come down from above. And I guess when you suddenly have the government and you have medical officers and you have the department all encouraging you to uptake a vaccine, with everything else going on, all the other distractions we have, for many people, they didn't really acquire informed consent, and they didn't look into it, and they've just gone down that path. I think a large number, however, felt absolute coercion. Yeah. I spoke to many who were not keen.
Mm-hmm. So if you had 30 seconds or a minute or even longer, that's fine. But, what would you say if you had the attention of thousands of Australian police? What's the one message that you would want to tell them?
Well, there's various, actually. But primarily the message for Australian police officers, why I resigned, was so that I could speak to you all. And that is to remind you of why you joined the police force in whatever state you're in. You didn't join to become a tool of oppression. You join to uphold the rights and the freedoms of citizens of this nation, to be integrated into your communities and to be a part of that community that only look to take action against a very small minority of the public. And so my message to you is to stop and actually think about what you're doing. Look at your use of force. We're all trained in tactical disengagement. We're trained how to diffuse a situation. Now, if you're going to carry forward a mindset that regardless of the circumstances, we're going to win that interaction, we're going to force compliance, just go back to having a look at what it is that you're actually dealing with. You're dealing with a public health order, a mandate, as opposed to actual law. And I would suggest to you that we don't need to win every altercation at any cost. Sometimes that cost is far too high.
So that's a really interesting concept, because I feel like the police have been maybe not trained, or I don't know, but they've become very bitter towards protesters in specifically. And I'll just give you one example. I was driving past a checkpoint at a protest once. This was many months ago, before I was in prison, just so everyone knows. And I just yelled out to a police officer, "Why don't you go catch some real criminals?" Like I wasn't yelling or swearing at them. I mean, I had to yell to get my voice to them. And he was a big guy, and he said, "Oh yeah, why don't you come over here and say that, huh?" And I was like, I was so shocked, because police aren't supposed to retaliate in that way. So, so they don't have to win every. Wow, that's amazing. I just haven't heard that said by a police officer before, so that's really fantastic to hear. So, how do you think police are going to recover from when they realize that they've been enforcing tyranny by following orders? How are they going to get through that?
Well, that remains to be seen, doesn't it? It's better if we can intercept that action right now and get them to start thinking, get them to start looking at what they're doing. You can be told by a senior officer to go and confront protesters or to go and deal with non-compliance with the public health order. But when you arrive on scene, that's when your original authority kicks in. That's where you have discretion. I can take it back to another example. Way back in the 90s, in general duties, I was tasked with a bunch of other officers down in the CBD in North Sydney to enforce pedestrian traffic and to write penalty notices for pedestrians who would cross against the lights. Fairly minor offence in the grand scheme of things, but the number of pedestrian injuries and fatalities was increasing. And so it was a valid enforcement. However, we were told that if people did not provide their details, not to arrest them, not to take it any further, and to leave it at a caution. Now, that's a prime example of where you don't have to win the totality of that interaction at any cost. We still won because we addressed the non-compliance. We spoke to the member of the public. Maybe next time they'll be more cautious. But we left that interaction with a fairly positive outcome. Had we then got into a struggle over a pedestrian offence and put people on the ground, arrested them, when you look at what the original offence is, was that use of force necessary? And I'd relate that back to what we're doing now. Do you want to be physically manhandling people? I mean, we've seen some really awful images on the media. And I've been involved in plenty of conflict over 3 decades of policing. But my first weapon of choice was always my brain and then my mouth. And if you can communicate with people rather than going physical, that's always a much better option, because we're not dealing with these people in these protests are protesting for the right to put food on the table. Come on, guys and girls. These are not the people that you joined to throw on the ground or to pin against the wall or to put in a chokehold like we've seen on some of the images. We really need to stop and regather and think. So you have discretion. And when you are sent to take enforcement action, that's when your original authority kicks in, and what you do is 100% upon you. You have to be able to justify what you do, not only to a court or to a tribunal, but to yourself and to your family. A great rule of thumb, Monica, was someone way early on in my career said to me, when you're dealing with a member of the public, deal with them as if in the manner in which you want someone to deal with your own mother.
Mm.
And now, if I can say that to every Australian police officer, look at the way you deal with peaceful protesters. If your mother was one of those, how would you want a fellow colleague to treat her? And then use that maybe as a yardstick.
I wish that was the case. I mean, I actually, even with all my interactions with police, I still think that most of the police are good. And I think that we can still fix the relationship, and I'll be totally behind that. However, there is a large majority of them going against their moral compass at this moment in time, and it must be eating away at them inside. And I actually feel really sorry for them, because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with that conscience when we get out of this, because we will. Why are more of them not standing up? Like, what do you think is it just money, or what is it? How can they not stand up at this point?
Yeah. Well, look, as you know, our whole society is built on debt. So we're enslaved to mortgages, to school fees, to that weekly or fortnightly paycheck. When you couple that with the culture within policing, that if you are an independent thinker, if you do not comply with directives, then you are likely to receive some sort of punishment. It makes it a very difficult paradigm to step out of. It's no excuse, it's no justification, absolutely, but it explains to a large degree why we don't see more people coming out. But we obviously have a social media policy and a media policy, as do all police departments and military and just about any organisation. You can't just go out and speak your mind. Free speech doesn't exist. And when you're speaking in uniform, I agree with that policy generally. I couldn't just get in uniform and just go and speak my mind about a whole lot of things, because I'm representing that agency. However, we're in a very unusual time now in our history, and the only way to actually voice those opinions is either anonymously, which is not ideal, or to do what I've done and step away from that so that you can raise those concerns. But that's why I've done it, so I can speak for those officers, because I know a lot of them are tied into debt and will find it very difficult to walk away from that job. So they don't have to walk away from the job, they just have to do it better. Yeah. They have to look at who they're dealing with, and they have to realise that these people are not the enemy. They're your community, they're your neighbours, they're your children's parents. You know, these are the people that you have sworn to look after. Yeah.
And they're fighting for your future as well, which is kind of an irony. So if just on the ground they just use their discretion, I think it could make a huge difference.
A massive difference.
And if they talk amongst themselves and raise awareness within that. But obviously I feel bad for them, because the media obviously paints protesters as being like the enemy as well. So it's pretty difficult.
Well, the media paints everything in the wrong colour, doesn't it? You know, it'll only show us interactions of police getting involved in an altercation, but it won't show the whole indication. Oftentimes video won't give the whole story, or practically never does. I know that from being in court many times, and my in-car video or my body-worn video would only tell one aspect. So the media will only show us what they want to cause the reaction that they want.
And I will say, for the audience who's watching, that I've personally had many great police interactions during COVID as well. You know, so it really just depends on who comes to the call out and what that person, but when the cameras aren't rolling, a lot of police have opened up, you know, and so I just hope that they're not going to struggle to a point that they can't turn back, you know, at this, you know, because they're being given choices in life, every day at the moment. So they need to make the right choices. Now, we're both kind of encouraging police to stand up, but quietly or loudly. Now, my question to you is like, do you regret anything that you've done? Do you regret standing up? Do you wish you were still a police officer?
No, not at all. Not at all. But I am in that position where, with over 3 decades, I was probably looking at what stage I will be leaving the department. It's just a shame for it to have happened in the manner in which it's happened. So I left prior to the mandate for New South Wales Police to be vaccinated. So I wasn't forced out, or I didn't leave because of that mandate. I left because of my absolute concern and disgust at the manner in which our department was heading. And so I actually never enforced any COVID legislation. I just flatly refused because in my mind it was not legitimate. We have overriding federal legislation, and on my training, federal always overrides state where there is a conflict. And so the Biosecurity Act has a lot of safety measures, safeguards for people that are just ignored under the public health orders. So I did not believe it was legitimate to enforce that. And our code of conduct and our statement of values in the New South Wales Police require us to act with integrity and to uphold the rule of law, and also to maintain rights and freedoms. Yeah. Now, how do you do that if you knowingly are going to enforce mandates that breach all of those?
It's so strange. We have the Biosecurity Act. It's so clear, but it's just not being upheld. So it's such a difficult time. Now, this isn't in this question. I want to ask you. There are a lot of people probably struggling, like I said, mentally, like you were, with all this enforcement, without the vaccine mandate or not. What do you think makes you just a little bit different, in the sense that you stood up and others haven't? Like, this isn't a time to be humble, okay? But like, what is it about you that really pushed you over the edge?
Much to the annoyance of family, I've always been one to swim against the stream. So it came as no surprise. That's a difficult question to answer. It's just that at the time that I was in my career, at my age, and the financial position I was in, and don't get me wrong, it's not a great position, but I'm not as tied down as most people in the police are. Everything just came together, and so there was a very strong feeling and an urging that would not let me sleep. And to those who have much is expected of them. And so yes, I'd given 30 odd years to supporting the community, which I did with complete honour and diligence. But the community also gave back to me in that role. And now the next phase, I guess, kicks in.
That is so true. If you feel that you can do something, you've got to do it, or you'll never be happy. That's it. Now, I have one last question for you. Is especially in Victoria, the people, especially the freedom movement, they've lost a lot of respect for police. What would you say to them to try and get them to understand the predicament that the police are in, and try to mend the relationships that are breaking right now? What would you say?
Look, it's a very easy path to be bitter, isn't it? It's a very easy path to lay blame and to throw stones. If anyone is perfect, let them cast those stones. But few of us fall into that category, and including myself. So don't lose faith in your police. Realise that your mainstream media pumps out fear and poison continuously. It never gives you actual, honest reporting of what's going on. And as you said, Monica, you've had many good interactions with police over this COVID period. So the media is not going to be reporting on the literally thousands of good interactions. They're just not interested. So what I would say to people is take the high ground here, because now is the time for unity. It's not a time to succumb to the disharmony and the disunity that has been called for by our leaders and by the mainstream media. They are trying to break down society. They are trying to divide us with medical apartheid and division. Don't engage in it. Rise above it, and everything you do has a butterfly effect, that ripple effect. And if you take something positive to a situation, that then directs the next stage of that interaction. If you take a negative aspect to something, then you lay down that path. So our focus very much determines our reality.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this interview. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
Look, I'd just like to say also, grab a pen. If you're a New South Wales police officer, or even any police officer in Australia, and you have accepted the offer of the vaccine through coercion, or you have now got vaccine regret because you've realised you didn't have informed consent, or even because you've seen adverse reactions to some of your family and friends or to yourself. If you're in that situation where now you are concerned by the fact that you've accepted that offer of the vaccine, then email for support and information at NSWPF classaction@protonmail.com. So that's New South Wales Police Force, NSWPF classaction@protonmail.com, just for support and information.
Great. I'll make a separate post about that for you, and also
Thank you.
I'll put it in the description of the video. Thank you so much for speaking to us, and good luck with the fight.
Thanks, Monica. We'll chat again, no doubt.